Hey everybody, it's low carb and keto nutrition specialist Amy Berger from 2itnutrition.com bringing you, as always, keto without the crazy. Before I get into today's topic, which is a viewer request, I want to remind you that I'm on Patreon. I've had a couple of new people join. Thank you and welcome. Patreon is a platform where you can help support content creators whose stuff you enjoy. Could be bloggers, people that make videos, actual tangible goods and crafts, people that sew, people that make pottery, all kinds of stuff. And by joining on Patreon, you just basically get perks that are not available to the general public. And on my particular Patreon, there's a link below, patreon.com/2itnutrition. For the bargain price, the whopping price of $5 US a month, you get live video calls with me once a week live Q&A chit chat discussion with me. And I also post exclusive audio things and videos and other stuff that is just for my patrons. So if you are a fan of when I just pop up randomly live on YouTube and do those, Ask Me Anything sessions, you could have that every week for $5 a month. Okay. Also, every now and then I get comments about various things in my videos, and I just want to remind you all that unless or until I start using like a whiteboard or have all fancy stuff, you don't actually have to be looking at these videos while while you're listening. You could just have it playing in the background and listen to it almost as if it's an audio podcast. I mean, if you want to look at my face while I talk, that's perfectly fine. But you don't have to. So if there's something about the background that bothers you, or I don't know what, you can just listen. Okay, on to the topic. Potassium. And forgive me, I don't remember who asked about this, but somebody wanted me to talk about potassium because they've noticed that it can be pretty difficult to get potassium on a low carb or ketogenic diet. And there are several different things I want to talk about. I don't have notes, so let's see if I can remember them all. The first thing to know is, well, I guess before the first thing to know, we often talk about electrolytes on keto, right? And when we say electrolytes, we usually specifically mean sodium, magnesium, and potassium. But sodium and magnesium really get the lion's share of the attention, right? You don't really hear people talking much about potassium. And there's a couple of different reasons for that, but all of these minerals, the reason they're called electrolytes is because they actually, like, molecularly inside you, they have an electrical charge. And we are electrical beings. All the stuff that happens as things get pumped out of and into our cells, it requires energy. And part of what makes that energy happen, or it requires energy, it's kind of a long story, is the electrical charges between these different minerals. It helps conduct all of those signals, right? So it's important that we have enough sodium, magnesium, and potassium. And most of you, I'm sure, have heard in numerous other places that sodium is really, if you are on a very strict low carb or ketogenic diet and you are getting headaches, almost always you need more salt. Or sodium. And if you just start to feel kind of sluggish and lethargic and just blah, salt usually just perks you right up. And magnesium we hear more often also for headaches. Magnesium can be very helpful for the people that get headaches, and more so for muscle cramps, especially in the legs. And a lot of people get muscle cramps in the legs on keto. And so some people find that magnesium supplementation helps with that. I think potassium can also help with that, but the way that all of these minerals work together is such that if you're getting enough magnesium and sometimes sodium, but the potassium kind of takes care of itself, because these three kind of keep each other in check and in balance, so to speak. So if you're getting enough sodium and enough magnesium on keto, you don't quite have to like micromanage the potassium. Okay, that's number one. So number two, let's see. I knew I should have made notes. Okay. The person who wrote to me, who asked me to talk about potassium, was mainly concerned because she was using an app to track some of her food. And she hadn't been previously. She was kind of new to tracking. And she was like horrified to see how low she was on potassium, how far short she was falling compared to the supposed requirements. So let's talk about that because it's a kind of a huge issue. And this applies to any vitamin or mineral, not just potassium or any of the other electrolytes. Something you have to understand is that the recommended daily amounts for those, and there's so many different abbreviations and acronyms, at least in the US, and if you're watching this outside the US, these are called something else, but the recommended daily allowance, the dietary reference intake, the estimated average requirement, like they have a lot of different names, and it all boils down to the amount of this vitamin or mineral that we think most people should get or need to get every day. Thinking about it that way, you almost have to laugh at how silly that mere notion is. Because if it were that critical to get that amount of all that stuff every day, you would die after a day or two of fasting. And we know that that doesn't happen, right? You can go a while without some vitamins and minerals. You'll die after a couple of days with no water, but you can survive a long time without getting a lot of vitamins and minerals in your diet. And I'm not suggesting that you do that, but it can't be that essential. It's not required to get exactly this much vitamin C every day, and this much potassium, and this much boron, and this much magnesium, and this much riboflavin, because we would all have died a long time ago if that were the case. Look at all the people thriving on the carnivore diet. And also, not suggesting everybody needs to do that, but we'd have a lot more very, very sick people if we needed to hit these requirements. So that's something to keep in mind. And the probably the most important thing to know about those levels that are set by government agencies or various public health authorities, they are almost entirely arbitrary. Or they're not arbitrary. What they are best guesses. They're like guesstimates. We think most people would probably be in better health if they got this much of this most of the time, and this much of this, as opposed to 10 times more that level or 10 times less. Like, probably a good idea if people fall within this general ballpark. And I just think, like, it's all well and good to have some kind of ballpark estimate to go by, but you really have to understand that nuance. It is a very, very vague guess. There is nothing about any of those requirement numbers that is tailored to you as an individual human, to your stage in life. I mean, there's different, they are different levels for adults versus very elderly adults versus infants and children versus pregnant women. Like, the requirements do change, but I just think you do not have to worry at all about hitting any of these particular numbers on any given day, let alone every day. And it's yet another reason why I really don't like those trackers, because they're making you think that you have to check all these boxes and hit all these targets when you absolutely don't. If somebody's going to track because they just kind of have no idea how much they're eating at all, I would rather you look at protein, fat, and carbs than any of the actual micronutrients. I just think those touted requirements and estimates are so very unreliable, let's say, vague, and just not reliable on an individual person-to-person basis. And let me see where else I want to go, because though that was a very key point, that all those, the DRI, the DRA, the blah 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 blah, blah abbreviation, it's a general guess. And the other thing, if you do care about those numbers and what the government says you should be getting if you do happen to care. Many people do not realize that that recommendation for potassium has actually been decreased a few years ago. I don't recall what year it was, but you might be looking at an outdated source. They used to recommend 4,700 milligrams of potassium daily, so 4.7 grams. That's a lot. So we get things like potassium in gram amounts versus something like, chromium that's in teeny tiny microgram itty bitty amounts. So we kind of need more potassium than we need of a lot of other nutrients, but it used to be 4,700. They have decreased it now, and usually in a lot of this stuff, the requirements for men and women are a little different. Men, they tend to recommend more. So for women right now, the daily recommendation is 2,600 milligrams of potassium, 2.6 grams, which is still high, but it's like almost half of what it used to be, 4,700 down to 2,600. And for men, I believe it's 3,600 currently, so 3,600 milligrams of potassium. Again, doesn't really matter because there's nothing about you as an individual human that says your body is going to fall apart or you're going to face dire health consequences if you don't have 2,600 or 3,600 milligrams of potassium. It might have been 3,400, sorry. I just looked at it before the video and I forgot. Either way, for men, it was 36 or 3,400. And I will put a link to one of my very favorite sources for super in-depth geeking out on vitamins and minerals. It's the Linus Pauling Institute at the I think it's Oregon State University, and it's just like my go-to source for all this stuff. So I'll put a link to that for those of you that want to nerd out on the details. Now let's talk about some keto foods that do have potassium, because we do actually need potassium. And I'll stick a pin in supplements because I'll come back to that. That's an important issue too, because many people on keto take magnesium supplements. Why do we hear so little about potassium supplements? And some people actually supplement with sodium too. They'll take sodium tablets like salt in a pill form, or we're just really liberal with the salt we use on our food. Okay. Foods on keto. You will typically hear that vegetables and fruits are the highest, the most concentrated sources of potassium. And that's probably true. I mean, vegetables and fruits do have a lot of potassium, probably more so than animal products. But animal products are not devoid of potassium. So many people are like, oh, my doctor said I need more potassium, so I'm eating bananas or I'm eating potatoes. And I think most of you know, or if you don't know, you're hearing it now for the first time. One of the keto, I hate to say keto foods, a food that's very low in carbohydrate that has a lot of potassium is avocado. So those of you that like avocado or guacamole, that's a great way to get potassium. Pumpkin is loaded with potassium. So just get the canned pumpkin unsweetened, or you could get just get a whole regular pumpkin when they're when they're at the stores, and you could roast it yourself, loaded with potassium. Tomatoes are very high in potassium. Most leafy greens. So there's plenty of foods you would eat on a ketogenic or low carb diet that will give you potassium. But let's say you don't eat that many vegetables. Like, let's say if you're following Dr. Westman's famous page 4 diet, there's a link below, or phase 1 of the food list in the book that I wrote with him called End Your Carb Confusion. That's ultra low carb, right? 20 grams total carbs per day. You're not going to be eating massive piles of vegetables if you're eating 20 total grams of carbs a day. So where are you going to get potassium? Well, beef has potassium. Pork and seafood have potassium. Dairy products have a little bit of potassium. So it's not like you're going to be starved of potassium if you're not eating bananas and potatoes and fruit. So you will get potassium. And I think let's come back to the supplements, because having said all of that, having said everything I just said, I do think some people can benefit from potassium supplements, and hardly anyone ever talks about it. Now, before I talk about that though, like, because a lot of it has to do again with those leg cramps and the like the Charlie horses that just kind of seize you up. It tends to happen at night. I don't really know why, but most people that experience leg cramps on a low carb or keto diet, it happens at night. We said magnesium helps for people, some people. For some people, this is Dr. Westman's magical tip that is very effective for a lot of people, although I cannot guarantee it will work for you. A very generous squirt of mustard or pickle juice. And I would say probably olive juice. If you buy like a jar of olives in a brine, a big swig of that brine, a big swig of pickle juice, or a big generous squirt of mustard. And I mean in your mouth and swallow it. I don't mean like rub the mustard on your leg when your leg is cramping up. I mean, that would be hilarious if that worked. Somebody should try that and report back to me. But I mean, take it orally, take it in your mouth, and that tends to help like that. I don't, it probably is the salt in those things because all of those are kind of salty, or it could be the vinegar. Who knows? But that's a little home remedy for you. If none of that works, or if for some reason you just think or know you need more potassium, couple of things you need to know about. I can only speak to the laws in the United States. If you are watching this from somewhere else, the laws might be different in your country. In the United States, over-the-counter potassium supplements by law are mandated that they can be no higher than 99 milligrams per capsule or per tablet, whatever. 99 milligrams is nothing when again that recommendation is 2,600. You'd have to take like 260 of those a day to get to 2,600. I mean, of course you're getting some from food, so you don't need to take that much. Or the men, 34, 3,600 milligrams, and your little potassium capsule is 99 milligrams. Like, good luck getting enough potassium out of that. You might as well just swallow half a jar of those pills. The reason they are mandated that way is because you can get yourself into trouble supplementing potassium depending on your individual situation, right? This is why I am always so hesitant to give blanket recommendations about certain things, because so much of it really depends on your situation. You know, there's a reason people go to school for this and we don't just spout out nonsense. Some people do, but if you have a kidney problem, if you have compromised kidney function, and your kidneys do not regulate some of these minerals as well as a healthy kidney, like the kidney's main job is to filter the blood and hold on to certain things and get rid of other things, and it helps to keep a lot of this stuff in the proper balance. If your kidneys are not able to do that, you might hang on to too much potassium. And the reason that's a problem is because you could have a fatal heart arrhythmia. Too much potassium plays a role in regulating your heart rate and heart muscle contraction. So you do not want to like overdose on potassium when you've got a kidney problem, because you will potentially be in a dangerous situation. I think that's a dumb reason to have potassium supplements legally limited to 99 milligrams per capsule, because, you know, unfortunately we live, at least in the US, in such a litigious society. Everyone's just looking to sue everybody else the second they can for any dumb little thing. There's no more personal responsibility. It should be on you. If you have a kidney problem, don't take potassium, whatever the dose is. Crazy high dose of potassium, don't buy it. And your doctor can tell you that very easily. Like, you'll know if you have a kidney problem, and then guess what? Don't supplement with potassium. But of course, I'm not giving medical advice. I'm not a doctor. I'm just giving you information. I just think that's a silly reason to have potassium at such low doses, when it would be very simple to just put a big warning on the bottle. If you have any known or suspected kidney problem, do not take skull and crossbones, you know? The other thing with potassium is if you have hypertension, high blood pressure, There's so many different kinds of blood pressure medicine, and they work through different mechanisms, meaning they help to lower or control your blood pressure by in you know speeding up a particular action or slowing down a particular action in your body. And these various drugs work on different actions. Some of these drugs are so one class of drugs that helps to lower blood pressure are diuretics, meaning they help you flush out fluid, they help you flush out water, which in theory at least will lower your blood pressure. Well, what happens when you're flushing out lots of water from your body? You're also going to flush out some minerals. So these drugs, first of all, are never intended to be taken for the long term, but that's a whole separate issue. There are the way that different, even within the class of diuretics, there's different kinds of diuretics that work through different mechanisms in your body. There are what is called potassium sparing diuretics and potassium wasting diuretics. And that should make sense. The function is built right into the name. A potassium sparing diuretic is designed such that however it helps your body get rid of excess fluid, it keeps the potassium behind. So these drugs don't, cause potassium deficiency or whatever. And then on the other hand, we have the potassium wasting diuretics where your body does not hold on, where the potassium gets flushed out with the water. So these drugs might be associated with a greater need for more potassium or less of a need for more potassium, depending on whether it's helping you retain or not helping you retain. You might need more or less based on that. And it's pretty rare to have hyperkalemia or hypokalemia. And I don't know the full name. Like the Latin, remember the periodic table from like high school, chemistry class? The chemical symbol for potassium is K plus, positively charged electrolyte. K, because it's kalemia. So hypokalemia is too little potassium in your blood. Hyperkalemia is too much potassium. Neither of which you want, both of which can be very dangerous. So you do have to be careful with potassium. But I'll link to a video below. I did a video recently on nutrient deficiencies, and the timing of it got messed up, so a lot of you don't even know that it was posted. You didn't see it show up, so give it a watch. But I mentioned there that it's pretty rare to have a nutrient deficiency or excess show up in your actual blood level. Like if you get a normal, routine blood test at a checkup or a physical or something, they include sodium, magnesium, potassium, chloride, the anion gap, all this stuff that you don't even really know what it means. And these things are regulated within a very, very tight or narrow range in your bloodstream. Your body works very hard to keep your blood level of potassium or sodium and magnesium within a very narrow range, because too far out of that range, above or below, bad juju, bad stuff starts to happen. So your body will work very hard to maintain a normal blood level of potassium. Just because your blood level of potassium is normal doesn't mean that your cells are actually getting enough, that there's enough in your tissues. And it's interesting to me that, we measure potassium at all in the blood, because something has to be really out of whack for your blood level to be noticeably up or down. Potassium doesn't do a whole lot in your bloodstream. Potassium it's either the most abundant or like the second or third. I should have looked before. It's one of the most abundant intracellular electrolytes, meaning inside your cells, inside your tissues, meaning the vast majority of potassium in your body is not floating around in your bloodstream. So I wouldn't say who cares about your blood level, like you still want to know that your blood level is normal, but you having a normal blood level of potassium really says nothing about whether your cells and tissues have an adequate amount. So, but that's straying a little far. Let's get back to the food and these requirements again. Bottom line, to sum up, you can get plenty of potassium from foods that are, suitable for low carb and ketogenic diets. And if you are using a tracker, which I really don't encourage much, but if you are someone who loves to track, I would almost ignore, not entirely, but almost ignore any particular cutoff points or levels requirements that app has set for you. If you notice that you're falling short in vitamin C or potassium or boron, chromium, selenium, like, I wouldn't get too worked up about this. But if you are concerned, I think I applaud you for caring about your health. I applaud you for being concerned. There's a difference between concern and fear and worry, anxiety and terror. So I hope that it is concern and curiosity rather than fear, anxiety, and worry and terror. But if you do want to dig deeper into this, if you would like a professional opinion as to your diet, your status, I do consultations. There's a link below in every video. I do personal one-on-one consultations if you are interested in that. But yeah, I'll just sum up. I think I wouldn't worry too much about potassium. If you do want or need a higher dose of potassium, I can help you with that. I don't want to put a link because I don't want people just doing it willy-nilly, but as a professional, I have accounts with supplement companies that manufacture potassium supplements in much higher doses, meaning not little pipsqueaky little 99 milligrams per tablet, like several hundred milligrams per tablet, that I can hook you up with. But I wouldn't want to do that without making sure that you don't have a kidney problem. So I don't want to put the link there for anyone to just go buy it, but you can contact me through my Stall Slayer slice. That's a tongue twister. Stall Slayer site, stallslayer.com. There's a contact form that if you want to ask me questions about this, or you want the link to those supplements, and I can kind of assess your situation, just contact me there. That's it. I hope that was helpful. I just don't stress over these little things. Look at our ancestors. Everyone's talking the ancestral diet. Dr. Ken Berry talks about the proper human diet. Do you think humans 1,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago or 50,000 years ago were sitting around worried about this stuff? Well, how much boron did I get today? How much, I don't know, thiamine did I get today? Were they like carving in their stone tablets like, oh, well, I ate this leaf that I picked out of the ground, that must have X of it? Like, no. I think we can get pretty far and be pretty darn healthy without giving a lot of very dedicated brain space to micromanaging the micronutrients. Micronutrients meaning vitamins and minerals. All right. Signing off. I will see you next time. Check out the Patreon, check out all the video links, and see ya.